Lecture 13. Participle, reduced adjective clauses, participle phrases. Objectives: to define participles and participle phrases, to identify reduced adjective clauses, to identify position and punctuation of participle phrases, to distinguish general form ing, participle phrases, and general form ed, participle phrases. To study perfect form participle phrases. Plan: participles and participle phrases, reduced adjective clauses, position and punctuation of participle phrases, general form ing, participle phrases, and general form ed, participle phrases, perfect form participle phrases. A participle phrase is an adjective phrase headed by a participle. Examples of participle phrases. In each of these examples, the participle phrase is shaded and the participle is in bold. Remember that participle phrases function as adjectives. Peering over the top of his glasses, her tutor shook his head. The participle phrase describes her tutor. Cracked from top to bottom, the mirror was now ruined. The participle phrase describes the mirror. A participle phrase can start with a past participle or a present participle. Here is a quick revision about participles. Remember that a participle is a verb form that can be used as an adjective. There are two types of participles. Present participles ending ing. Here is an example of one as an adjective, the rising tide. Past participles usually ending ed, d, t, en, or n. Here is an example of one as an adjective, the rising cake. Understanding adjective clauses as an adjective clause, also called a relative clause, is a group of words that modify or describe a noun. Remember that adjective clauses contain a subject and the verb, begin with the relative pronoun who, whom, whose, that, which, and are dependent clauses, which means that they cannot stand alone because they have no meaning without an independent main clause. Reduced adjective clauses will reduce sentences when you have the same subject in the main clause and the adjective clause. Adjective clauses contain relative pronouns like who, which, or that. The reduced adjective clause becomes an adjective phrase which does not have a subject. An adjective phrase does not have a subject and a verb. Instead, it has a present participle, base verb plus ing for the active voice or a past participle for the passive voice. Reduced adjective clauses. Reduced relative clauses refer to the shortening of a relative clause which modifies the subject of a sentence. Reduced relative clauses modify the subject and not the object of a sentence. Reduced relative clauses are shortened versions of relative clauses. They are also known as reduced adjective clauses. Relative clauses usually modify a noun or a noun phrase in the sentence, as in this example where the word table is being modified. The table that he bought was for his kitchen. In this reduced clause that is no longer used, the table he bought was for his kitchen. However, it is not always just a matter of omitting the relative pronoun. There are different reduced relative clause rules depending on the sentence involved. Types of reduced relative clauses. Reduced relative clauses are mainly created through the use of present participle phrases, past participle phrases, past participle prepositional phrases, adjectives, and adjective phrases. Well, now look at each of these in turn. Types of reduced relative clauses. Relative clauses can also be reduced to shorter forms if the relative clause modifies the subject of the sentence. Relative clause reduction refers to removing a relative pronoun to reduce. An adjective, person who was happy, happy person. An adjective phrase, man who was responsible for, man responsible for. A prepositional phrase, boxes that are under the counter, boxes under the counter. A past participle, student that was elected president, student elected president. A present participle, people who are working on the report, people working on the report. Reduce to an adjective. Remove the relative pronoun. Remove the verb usually be, but also seem, appear, etc. Place the adjective used in the relative clause before the modified noun. Examples. The children who were happy played until 9 in the evening. Reduced. The happy children played until 9 in the evening. The house, which was beautiful, was sold for $3 million. Reduced. The beautiful house was sold for $3 million. Reduced to an adjective phrase. Remove the relative pronoun. Remove the verb usually be, but also seem, appear, etc. Place the adjective phrase after the modified noun. Examples. The product, which seemed perfect in many ways, failed to succeed in the market. Reduced. The product, perfect in many ways, failed to succeed in the market. The boy who was pleased by his grades went out with his friends to celebrate. Reduced. The boy pleased by his grades went out with his friends to celebrate. Reduce to prepositional phrase. Remove the relative pronoun. Remove the verb be. Place the prepositional phrase after the modified noun. Examples. The box which was on the table was made in Italy. Reduced. The box on the table was made in Italy. The woman who was at the meeting spoke about business in Europe. Reduced. The woman at the meeting spoke about business in Europe. Reduced to a past participle. Remove the relative pronoun. Remove the verb be. Place the past participle before the modified noun. Examples. The desk which was stained was antique. Reduced. The stained desk was antique. The man who was elected was very popular. Reduced. The elected man was very popular. Reduced to a past participle phrase. Remove the relative pronoun. Remove the verb be. Place the past participle phrase after the modified noun. Examples. The car which was purchased in Seattle was a vintage Mustang. Reduced. The car purchased in Seattle was a vintage Mustang. The elephant which was born in captivity was set free. Reduced. The elephant born in captivity was set free. Reduced to present participle. Remove the relative pronoun. Remove the verb be. Place the present participle phrase after the modified noun. Examples. The professor who is teaching mathematics will leave the university. Reduce. The professor teaching mathematics will leave the university. The dog that is lying on the floor won't get up. Reduce. The dog lying on the floor won't get up. Some action verbs reduce to the present participle ing form, especially when the present tense is used. Remove the relative pronoun. Change the verb to the present participle form. Place the present participle phrase after the modified noun. Examples. The man who lived near my home walks to work every day. Reduce. The man living near my home walks to work every day. The girl who attends my school lives at the end of the street. Reduce. The girl attending my school lives at the end of the street. Prepositional phrases. If the relative pronoun is followed by a prepositional phrase, then this can be reduced. The book that is on the table is mine. The book on the table is mine. The house which is across the street is for sale. The house across the street is for sale. The man who is in the jacket is my cousin. The man in the jacket is my cousin. Adjectives and adjective phrases. Adjectives. If the relative clause has only an adjective and the verb to be within it, then the adjective can be placed before the noun and the relative pronoun and verb to be can be deleted. The boy who is oldest won the race. The oldest boy won the race. You can carry the box that is lightest. You can carry the lightest box. Let's go to the country which is the hottest. Let's go to the hottest country. Adjective phrases. If there is a verb other than the verb to be, usually sense verbs such as smell, look, feel, sound, etc., then we reduce it to an adjective phrase. Adjective plus a verb plus ing. I played the song that sounded the best. I played the best sounding song. He always wears clothes that look expensive. He always wears expensive looking clothes. When do we use reduced relative clauses? Reduced relative clauses can be used to make your writing more concise, so it is common to use them within formal or academic writing, though they can appear in any style of writing. The grammatically correct reduction of relative clauses is quite a difficult skill. It is something the examiner in the IELTS test will look out for when awarding a band 7 and above for grammatical range and accuracy. Note though that this will not include reducing relative clauses to prepositional phrases, adjective phrases or adjectives, because when you do this you are creating a more simple sentence. However, reduced relative clauses in the form of present and past participle phrases is seen as a higher level skill. We can use participle clauses after a noun in the same way as relative clauses. This gives more information about the noun. We sometimes call this a reduced relative clause. A present participle verb plus ing can be used in the same way as an active relative clause. The man driving the car is a friend of mine. The man who is driving the car is a friend of mine. The present participle can replace any active tense, not just the present continuous tense. Lorries coming over the bridge have to be careful on the wind. Lorries that come over the bridge have to be careful of the wind. Who was the girl wearing the red dress? Who was the girl who was wearing the red dress? Students handing in their essays late will lose 10 marks. Students who hand in their essays late will lose 10 marks. A past participle can be used in the same way as a simple passive relative clause. We read the email sent by the manager. We read the email that had been sent by the manager. This vase made in China in the 14th century is very valuable. This vase which was made in China in the 14th century is very valuable. She only eats cakes made by her mother. She only eats cakes that are made by her mother. Being plus past participle can be used in the same way as a continuous passive relative clause. The poem being read by the actor was written by my brother. The poem that is being read by the actor was written by my brother. The strawberries being eaten at the wedding were grown in Scotland. Things to notice. We generally don't use perfect participles having plus participle in this case. We can't use this kind of participle clause if we are talking about one finished action which is not repeated. We do not use who was the girl dropping the coffee. Instead, we use a normal relative clause. Who was the girl who dropped the coffee? Participles and participle phrases must be placed as close to the nouns or pronouns they modify as possible, and those nouns or pronouns must be clearly stated. A participle phrase is set off with commas when it comes at the beginning of a sentence, interrupts a sentence as a non-essential element. So let's talk about placement and punctuation. Participle phrases can appear in one of three places within a sentence, but be careful not to risk awkwardness and confusion by placing it too far from the word it modifies. For example, a participle phrase that indicates a cause usually precedes the main clause and sometimes follows the subject, but only really appears at the end of the sentence. No matter when they are always modify a subject. Correctly punctuation, a sentence that contains such a clause depends on where it is placed in reference to the subject. Before the main clause, the participle phrase is followed by a comma. Speeding down the highway, Bob didn't notice a police car. After the main clause, it is preceded by a comma. In mid-sentence position, it is set off by commas before and after. The real estate agent, thinking of her profit potential, decided not to buy the property. In each sentence below, the participle phrase clearly modifies the subject. My sister, and suggests a cause. Discouraged by the long hours and low pay, my sister finally quit her job. My sister, discouraged by the long hours and low pay, finally quit her job. But consider what happens when the participle phrase moves to the end of the sentence. My sister finally quit her job, discouraged by the long hours and low pay. Here the logical order of cause-effect is reversed. As a result, the sentence may be less effective than the first two versions. While the sentence absolutely works grammatically, some may misread that the job is feeling discouraged instead of the sister. Present participle phrases is a relative pronoun is the subject of the relative clause, then the clause can be reduced to a present participle. Verb plus ing, phrase or past participle verb plus ed phrase. If the verb is in the active voice, it gets reduced to a present participle phrase. Any active tense can be changed to a present participle phrase. Present simple, past simple, present continuous, present perfect, etc. To do this, you delete the relative pronoun and any verbs if there are any and use the present participle of the main verb. If it is a negative sentence, then we use not at the beginning of the participle phrase. Note that in these reduced relative clause examples, there are a mix of active tenses. The people that exercised every day lost the most weight. The people exercising every day lost the most weight. There were many employees who were working very hard. There were many employees working very hard. It is worth noting at this point that if a non-defining participle phrase refers to the subject of the independent clause, the phrase may be placed either immediately before or after the subject of that independent clause. If the relative clause is in the passive voice and the simple tense, then it can be reduced by deleting the relative pronoun and the verb to be, leaving you with the past participle. If it is a negative, then you place not at the beginning of the participle phrase. The new illness which was discovered by a doctor in Nigeria has not yet been named. The new illness discovered by a doctor in Nigeria has not yet been named. If it is in the passive voice but it is a continuous tense verb, present or past, then you delete the connecting word and to be, leaving you with being plus past participle. You then have a continuous passive participle phrase. The building which is being built by Kingston developers should be completed by May. The building being built by Kingston developers should be completed by May. Perfect tenses. If the clause in the passive perfect tense, present or past, then have or had is replaced by having. So we end up with having plus being to make the reduced relative clause. This is a perfect passive particle phrase. Again, if the non-defining participle phrase refers to the subject of the independent clause, the phrase may be placed either immediately before or after the subject of that independent clause. In the case of the perfect tenses, you can choose either a present or past participle depending on what you wish to emphasize in the sentence. If you wish to emphasize the prior completion of the activity, in the participle phrase have is changed to having, leaving you with having plus past participle. You will then have formed the perfect active participle phrase. The students that have studied the hardest have the best results. The students having studied the hardest have the best results. So in the above example, it emphasized that the hard studying took place before the best results. If you do not wish to emphasize in the particle phrase the prior completion of the activity, then it is more common to use the present participle. In this case, have is omitted and the main verb of the relative clause is changed to the present participle. The students that have studied the hardest have the best results. The students studying the hardest have the best results. We've been looking at present and past participle phrases, but it should also be noted that we can, in cases, reduce relative clauses with just a past particle. We can do this if the sentence had the verb to be or to have and only a past participle. In this case, we can move the past participle to before the modified noun. The car which had broken down was by the edge of the road. The broken down car was by the edge of the road. So, questions you have to answer. What is the distinction between adjectival participles and adverbial phrase? How can adjective clauses be reduced? What is the position and punctuation of participle phrases? What are the perfect form participle phrases? And sources you can use in order to prepare for practical lessons.